The moment the ambassador said humans were pets, the whole room turned to look at me, and I felt my heart slam against my ribs because I was the only human close enough to answer him. My name is Mira Halden. I was 17 years old, sitting in the back row of a chamber built for 6 different species, holding a data tablet I was never supposed to use for anything except taking notes. I was not a diplomat. I was not a soldier. I was an aide, sent along by the human delegation because someone needed to carry files and stay quiet. Quiet was the plan. Quiet was always the plan. The chamber sat aboard a station called Veyron's Rest, a neutral meeting point built in empty space between 5 different territories. Ships from a dozen worlds came and went outside its windows, and inside, delegates argued over resources that kept whole star systems alive. That day, the argument had turned ugly fast. The Kralith ambassador stood at the center of the room. His name was Threx Vaughn, and he was built like a wall, covered in hard bronze plating that caught the light every time he moved his arms. His people were known across the sector for one thing above all else, and that thing was strength. Not cleverness, not trade. Strength, and the willingness to use it. He was talking to the Ashen Concord delegates, 6 slim, silver-skinned diplomats who represented 3 peaceful star systems. Their ships carried food, medicine, and fuel between worlds that could not survive without each other. Threx Vaughn wanted a new deal, one that gave his people control over Concord resources, and he was not asking nicely. "Accept our terms," he said, his voice low and heavy through the translator device floating near his shoulder, "or your convoys may suffer regrettable incidents. We are not required to protect ships we do not claim as our own." I watched the Ashen delegates go still. Their skin, usually a soft silver, turned pale and gray around the eyes. That color change was fear. I had read about it in a briefing packet the night before, the kind of detail nobody else in the room seemed to remember, because nobody else had spent their evening studying species biology instead of trade numbers. Nobody spoke. The human delegation leader, a calm and careful man named Elias Grant, kept his eyes on his notes, waiting for the right diplomatic moment, the kind of moment that never seemed to come fast enough. Then Threx Vaughn turned his massive head toward our table, and his optical sensors settled on us, like we were an afterthought worth mentioning only for amusement. "The humans need not worry themselves," he said. "Your kind holds no military weight in this region. You are little more than tame animals, kept comfortable by species who allow it. This conversation does not concern you." A few translator drones actually paused before repeating his words, as if even the machines were unsure they should say something so cold out loud. The room's attention swung toward our table again, waiting to see what Elias Grant would do. He did nothing. He kept staring at his notes, jaw tight, letting the insult sit there because reacting to it would give it power it did not deserve. I do not fully understand what made me stand up. I have thought about it many times since that day. Maybe it was watching Sevi Oren, the oldest Ashen delegate, sitting 3 seats away from me, with her hands folded so tightly her fingers had turned white. Maybe it was hearing a grown man threaten defenseless convoys and calling it business. Whatever it was, my chair scraped against the floor before my brain finished deciding to move. Every eye in the chamber turned toward me. A teenage human aide, standing in the back row where nobody like me was ever supposed to speak. "I have one thing to say," I told them, and my voice came out steadier than I expected. "Just one thing, then I will sit back down." Threx Vaughn's plated jaw shifted, and his optical sensors narrowed at me. "This session does not include." 11 months ago," I said, cutting across him before he could finish, "a Kralith patrol group struck a set of unescorted freight convoys near the Meridian Drift. 6 ships, 41 crew members. Your government filed a report calling it opportunistic salvage of abandoned Concord property. The soft hum of the room's air system suddenly seemed louder, because everything else had gone quiet. Those convoys were never abandoned," I continued. "They were being watched, quietly, by 3 small ships that were not flying Concord signals, because they were not Concord ships at all. Your patrol group engaged them anyway, in low light, believing they had found easy, undefended cargo." Threx Vaughn had not moved. Nobody in the room had moved. "Your patrol group did not return," I said. 9 ships, gone. No wreckage was ever claimed. No official record explains what happened. Your own intelligence reports still list the cause as unknown, because whoever was flying those small ships was never officially there. I let the silence stretch for one long breath before I finished. So when you tell this room that Concorde convoys will suffer regrettable incidents unless this treaty favors you, I would think carefully about who else might be nearby the next time your people go looking for undefended cargo. We do not send warships to trade meetings. We do not need to. That is not a threat, Ambassador. That already happened once, and your people still cannot explain how. I sat back down. The silence that followed was not polite. It was the kind of silence where you could hear the station's air circulating through the vents, where 3 separate species translator drones sat frozen, because nobody had anything left to say through them. Sevi Oren's tense hands finally loosened, and she looked at me like she was reconsidering everything she thought she understood about humans. Threx Vaughn's plating had gone rigid. A posture I would later learn meant something closer to calculation than anger, the look of someone doing math they did not like the answer to. Elias Grant still had not looked up from his notes, but I saw the edge of his mouth twitch into something that was not quite a smile, yet was not far from one either. It was Sevi Oren who finally broke the stillness, her voice quiet but steady, in a way it had not been all session. "I believe," she said, "we should return to discussing the escort terms, from the very beginning, and with fairness this time." Threx Vaughn said very little for the rest of the meeting. When the session finally ended, the room slowly filled with noise again, delegates whispering to each other, drones humming back to life, chairs shifting as everyone stood to leave. I felt my legs shaking slightly now that the moment had passed, the adrenaline draining out of me all at once. Elias Grant walked beside me as we left the chamber. He did not scold me for speaking without permission. He did not exactly thank me either. "That story about the Meridian Drift," he said quietly, once we were clear of the crowd. "Where did you learn that?" "I read the old incident logs during prep," I answered. Everyone else was studying the resource numbers instead. He nodded slowly, like my answer confirmed something he had already suspected about me. "Next time," he said, "warn me before you make an entire alien species rethink what humans are capable of." "No promises," I said. He almost laughed, but held it back, the way people do when they are trying to stay professional, in a hallway full of strangers from other worlds. I never learned whether the story about those unmarked ships was completely true, or how much of it Elias Grant already knew and chose not to say. Some information, I came to understand later, works best as leverage, while everyone stays a little unsure of its edges. What I did learn that day, watching an entire alien chamber fall silent around a teenage aide with a notebook, is that being underestimated is not a weakness at all. It is simply a warning nobody bothered to read in time. Weeks later, back on the human transport ship heading home, I sat by a window and watched Veyrun's Rest shrink into a small point of light behind us. Elias Grant found me there, holding 2 cups of something warm, and handed one to me without a word. "The Concorde signed the fair version of the treaty," he said, sitting down across from me. "Escort terms included." Threx Vaughn did not argue again after that day. "Good," I said, wrapping my hands around the warm cup. "You know," he continued, "most delegates spend years learning how to speak in rooms like that one. You did it once, on your first real assignment, without any training at all." "I did not plan it," I admitted. I just could not stay quiet while he talked about the Concorde like their lives did not matter. Elias studied me for a moment, the kind of look people give when they are deciding whether to say something important. "That instinct," he finally said, "is worth more than most of the training we give people out here. Do not lose it." I looked back out the window at the stars sliding past, thinking about Sevi Oren's hands finally relaxing, about the silence that had filled that chamber after I spoke, about how quickly a room full of powerful strangers could change their minds when someone simply refused to stay quiet. I did not know what my next assignment would bring, or which room I would end up standing in next, or which powerful stranger I would have to face down with nothing but a data tablet and a steady voice. But I knew one thing for certain as our ship carried us home through the dark. I was done being the quiet one in the back row.